The perfect wedding gift out of a great carving hardwood. So guys, most of the time we carve softwoods. We do a lot of redwood, we do a lot of pine and cedar, and people are kind of intimidated by doing hardwoods. Oak is difficult to carve and it's hard on the bits, but this Knotty Alder, man, this stuff carves great. So it's technically a hardwood, but in all reality, it carves like a softwood, and it's really, really consistent. And as far as hardwoods go, it's pretty inexpensive. We got this stuff down at Woodworker's Source in Phoenix. Of course, it depends on where you're at, what part of the country, what part of the world, how availability is, but this stuff really did not cost very much at all. For today's sign, we're actually using the stencil of the month for September 2024. Now, what a stencil and template of the month are, you actually get them for free if you sign up for the membership. I'll put all the information down in the link below and you can check that out. And we're also using the universal font. We have our 3-inch and our 1-inch universal font. Now, we don't use this a whole lot, but I think this font goes perfect for a wedding sign because it's really nice, it's good size, and it reads really, really well, especially on this Knotty Alder. I really like the contrast between the script of the stencil and then the really blocky look of the universal font. I think it looks really good. All right, time to make some sawdust.
So we got 2 Knotty Alder boards from Woodworker's Source. Now they are 6 inches by 4 quarters, and I think they're like 12 feet long. So I think we paid $35 a piece for these. I can't really remember. It was actually a while ago, but man, it was a great deal. So what I did is I cut off 2 pieces at 26 inches to glue it up for this board. So that would give me roughly 12 by 24 once I clean up the sides and everything. Now, we've been getting a lot of hate lately. I used way too much glue on this. I know I did. I'm sorry. Don't be mad at me. Don't send threatening emails. There's a lot of wasted glue. I get that. I'm working on it, guys. Anyway, we glued this thing up, and then we also used the glue to fill in some of these holes, but that actually didn't work as well because I kind of did it as an afterthought. I should have done that first, so I'm actually going to have to fill them with something else. But once the glue was all dry, it gave me a really nice board. Then all I had to do was trim up the sides, and it turned out to be about 25.5 inches long. So it was a little bit longer than I expected, but that's all right. It still turned out really nice. Now, normally we'll use our sled, but this is a small piece, and this sander just takes wood off like nobody's business. So I just surfaced both sides and then picked which side I wanted to be the front. This wood filler here, it really works well. Now, I did make a mistake. It's a little bit lighter than the wood itself, so you can see it pretty easily. But basically, I just squeeze it on wherever I want to fill, use a putty knife and push it into the gaps, and then sand it off. And this stuff dries in like 5 minutes. It works really well, but what I should have done is I should have stained it. This stuff takes stain, so you can actually match the wood color of the board. And I didn't do that. I completely forgot about staining it. Real quick, guys, we got a brand new camera and I'm still working out all the bugs in this thing. There's so many different settings and I'm trying to get the color right, so this is a little washed out, but just have a little bit of patience and I'll get it figured out and the video quality will go way up in the near future. Laying the stencil out was a touch tricky. I wanted the same amount of space at the top and bottom between the bottom line and the bottom of the board and the top line and the top of the board. So I made my marks and I made my lines. But what I had to do was when I actually got ready to spray it, I had to move that stencil up to where the line was showing in the top of the letters themselves. I hope that makes sense because I'm not going to carve all around that entire little rectangle there. I'm only going to carve this inset. So if I would have left the top of the stencil on that line, it actually would have been maybe a ½ inch lower than I wanted it to be. So you'll see that happen here in just a second. Once I got my lines for the top and the bottom, then I just spaced out my middle line and I made the marks for that. That way I could lay everything out. Something that happens a decent amount is there's bows in the stencils or in the templates. But remember, these are made out of 1/8 inch plywood. It's really thin. And depending on what the moisture content in the air is in your area, like right now it's monsoon season in the desert, it gets a little bit of a bow to it. but that's an easy fix. Just do your layout on bench cookies, which you can see the board is lifted up here, and then use clamps. And I'm using this pencil to push down on the bottom of it to make sure that I get a good clean line. The first bit I'm using is our 60-degree V-groove at 3/16 of an inch deep, and I'm going to use that for all of the script on the stencil. For script, I really like this bit. It's a little bit difficult. I wouldn't consider it like a beginner's technique. It's more of an intermediate or advanced technique, but you can lift the side of the base plate up and you can adjust the depth of your bit on the fly, which is really handy. That's another reason that these base plates really help a lot with carving. Now, you can see there's thin lines like this one I'm carving right here. What you need to do is you need to remember that the deeper your bit goes, the more width it's going to have in it, the wider the cut. So as I lift it up for the thin lines, it really helps a lot and it gives a good clean cut. Now for this straight line right here, I'm doing 2 passes. I want to get the line nice and even first, and then I'm going to go back and make it deep. Remember, when you have a hard time holding long straight lines, go shallow first. The next bit I'm using is our profile bit at 1/4 of an inch deep. Now usually for large inset letters I would actually use the 60-degree, but because this universal font has some sharp corners, there's nothing rounded on it at all. Every corner is sharp. The profile bit is really the way to go. It helps you to get much sharper corners, much sharper lines, instead of having kind of that wider V-groove look. Going at 1/4 of an inch deep on these big letters is really the way to go. Now again, if you have kind of a hard time keeping a straight line, or if you got a really grainy board, you can always start shallower to get your initial line. But again, like I said before guys, this stuff carves great. I really like it. It's very consistent. There's no soft hard grain. Around the knots obviously it's going to get a little bit harder, but for the most part, like 95% of this whole board carved exactly the same. There was no deviation in how it carved at all. The nice thing about this size letter is that going at 1/4 of an inch deep, I still had plenty of room for error for my lines, but it also gave me plenty of room after both sides were carved to get in there with a clean out bit and take out the rest of the wood. Now when I went down into the 1-inch letters, I actually dropped my depth a little bit. Well, not dropped it, I brought it up. I brought it up to about 3/16 because it's a little bit harder to get the straight lines on the smaller letters. Something that you want to remember guys is that when you're doing larger stuff, it's actually a little bit easier because you don't have to get really tiny detail like that. So when you're going to do a big sign, don't worry, don't get intimidated. It's actually a little bit easier. It's kind of like driving on the freeway instead of driving in town. It's a little more intimidating, but in all reality, it's easier to do. Once all the outline was done, I went in with our 60-degree bit at 3/16 of an inch deep, and I took out the remainder of the wood inside those letters. We normally do this with a 90-degree bit, but there wasn't enough room. The 60-degree bit works just fine. I don't recommend it on large areas, but in an instance like this, it worked perfect. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is a step a lot of people skip. Once you're done carving, use a stiff bristle brush and go in there and scrub the crap out of all your carving to get anything that's stuck in there out before you do your spraying. Now for the edge, we're using our 45-degree chamfer bit. I'm going to put a small chamfer on the back, even though, you know, Dad tried to convince me to do that for years and I always fought it, but I think it gives it a much better look. And then I'm going to do a scallop on the front. And this is really easy to do and it gives it a good look. So once you get that done, make sure you sand your corners and sand off your edges, because after scalloping, those corners can be really sharp. Once it's all carved, then I'm going to spray it all with our black primer. Now this alder did not bleed at all. We didn't put any sort of clear or any sort of protectant on it before we sprayed it, and there was zero bleeding, which I was pretty happy about. Once it was done drying, which only took a couple minutes, I used our 80 grit disc on a disc sander and then a 120 grit disc on the random orbital, and I sanded all the black off and gave it a good smooth finish and get it ready for clear coat. Now we use Rust-Oleum Clear on pretty much everything that's going indoors. It says it'll work outdoors, and I think it does, but I don't think it holds up near as well as something like Spar Urethane or Helmsman, something like that. So this is going to be an indoor sign, so we just went with our regular Rust-Oleum. And look at that grain pop. Man, that looks good.
So there it is, you guys. If you get a chance to carve this Knotty Alder, this stuff carves beautifully. Man, it looks really nice, it carves good, and I really like it. I think I want to make some more stuff out of it. So as always, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget, we have everything on the website, makeawoodsign.com, and if you're interested in the memberships, I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.